Did you know nearly 1 in 4 renters actually regret the apartment they chose? And in New York City, where rent prices are sky high and listings go faster than that dollar slice of pizza, those regrets hit extra hard. That's why in this video, I'm giving you 7 tips to actually find an apartment you love here in the Big Apple. Hey, I'm Justin. I've been a real estate agent in New York for over 6 years now, and from my time both as an agent and as a tenant, I know firsthand how overwhelming this process can be trying to find an apartment in this city. But don't worry, I'm gonna break everything down to make sure you go from just browsing to keys in hand without all the stress. First, we need to talk about the most important thing, and that is your budget. So many people look to move to New York City and are instantly shocked by the price. And the same thing happened to me. When I was finally ready to move out of my childhood home in East Harlem, I was shocked not only by the monthly rent price, but the upfront costs of moving, such as security deposits and moving fees. So how do we make sure you don't have to go through that? Well, we need to establish your budget early. And by this, we're talking about both your monthly rent budget as well as your budget for the upfront costs. For the rent, most landlords in New York City follow what's called the 40 times rule, meaning that your annual household income has to be at or above 40 times what the monthly rent is. So if you're eyeing that one apartment that costs $2,500 a month, that means the landlord wants to see you make minimum $100,000 a year. So many people freak out about the 40 times rule because in other states, most landlords look for a monthly income that is 3 times the rent. But these numbers are pretty much the same. See, 40 times the monthly rent in annual income is essentially saying that your monthly household income is 3.33 times the rent, which is not far off from most states that follow the 3 times rule. But the other costs we need to look at are your upfront costs, and these can vary depending on where you live and how you found that apartment. First, you will likely have to pay an application fee. Those fees are used to cover things like credit screenings and background checks, but know this. As of 2019, landlords cannot charge you more than $20 per person for the application fee. So if a landlord or a real estate agent tells you you have to pay them $200 just to apply, run. Once you are approved for the apartment, you will likely have to pay either first month's rent, last month's rent, or security deposit when you're signing your lease. But again, know this. As of 2019, landlords cannot charge you for all 3 of these things. You can only be charged either first month and last month, or first month and security deposit. If you see a landlord that's trying to charge you all 3, you can let them know this, or you can just turn away from the deal. Now we need to talk about the most controversial fee, and that is broker fees, because New York is one of the few places where these fees can still be charged to tenants. And when I tell you, these fees can be high. Typically, broker fees start as low as 1 month's rent, but can go as high as up to 15% of the annual rent of the apartment, which means for every $1,000 in rent that you're paying, the broker fee could be worth up to $1,800. But fear not, because as of June 11, 2025, New York will be implementing the SAVE Act. And part of the rules under this act is that broker fees will not just be charged to tenants, but is only going to be responsible for whoever hires the broker. So if the landlord hired the broker, they are going to be responsible for paying that fee, and vice versa to you if you hire your own broker. Next, we need to talk about the websites you're using to actually find your apartments, because these websites are not created equal. When it comes to apartment hunting, the biggest websites people use are StreetEasy, RentHop, and Apartments.com. And each of these 3 websites have their pros, but they also have their cons. Apartments.com is basically the go-to website for any rental listings throughout the United States. But a major issue I found is that they only post what's called the net effective rent. Don't worry about that, I'll discuss that later in this video. RentHop is a great option as well because it's hyper-localized and solely focuses on New York City. But you need to be careful because pretty much anybody can post on RentHop as long as they buy the appropriate amount of credits. So you will have to dig your way around brokers who are fishing for new clients or scammers that are trying to steal your money. StreetEasy is hands down my favorite website, and it is the go-to site for finding an apartment here in New York City. It gives you a lot of information such as previous rents, the ability to see videos and 3D tours of the apartments, 2, information and reviews on the actual property management companies running them. Also, pro tip, try to check the property management company's official website. See, many of these companies have now implemented listing services on their websites where you can see any and all available apartments from any of the buildings that they run in one place. This is a great option if you're really honing down on a specific neighborhood, or if you're trying to find no-fee options to avoid broker fees altogether. Next, we need to talk about open houses, because open houses are not just for buying properties, they're also for rentals as well. See, during the spring and summer months, brokers might host open houses where 20, 30, even 100 people will line up just to see a specific apartment. And when I tell you, these things are insane. So if you're looking to go to an open house to snag a deal on an apartment, you want to come prepared because speed is key. So have all of your documents with you on hand and a pen ready in case you want to fill out that application. Remember, a lot of apartments are first come, first served, so you'll want to be one of the first people to get their application in so you could try to snag that apartment. Property management companies also host open houses, but you'll want to pay special attention to the wording because you may see on StreetEasy that a property management company's building says open house, but right next to it, it will also say by appointment only. This is because a lot of management companies use the open house feature on StreetEasy and apartments.com as a marketing tactic to get their apartments seen by a much wider audience, no matter how old the listing is. We touched on this in the last tip, but having your paperwork ready to go is so crucial for finding an apartment in this city because these listings go quickly. And the last thing you want to do is fall in love with an apartment, wait 1 or 2 days to make up your mind, only to find out that somebody snagged it while you were still there. Believe me, it's happened to me, and it's also happened to plenty of prospects that I've shown apartments to. So here's the general list of documents you're going to need, and I highly suggest saving them on either your iCloud or on a Google Drive. The first thing you're going to need is proof of income. This could come in the form of your last 2 to 4 pay stubs, a signed employment letter if you're moving into the city for a new job, or a CPA letter projecting your income if you're self-employed. On top of these documents, you'll want to submit things like your last 2 to 3 months of bank statements, copies of your photo ID, and your most recent tax return or your W-2. Depending on the specific landlord, you may be asked for additional documents like social security cards, landlord references, etc., but that varies building to building. Now, if you don't make the income qualification, a lot of landlords will also allow you to bring in a guarantor, which is a co-signer for the apartment, but you'll want to be careful and note the requirements. Guarantors need to make 80 times the rent rather than 40 times, meaning for that same $2,500 apartment, they need to make $200,000 in annual income, and they will likely have a higher credit threshold than what a regular applicant would need. Okay, if you're going to be apartment hunting in New York City, you need to know what net rent and gross rent means. These two terms alone can either save you or cost you hundreds of dollars during your lease term. If you go to a website like StreetEasy, you may see an apartment say that it's $2,400 a month, only to find out that the actual rent of it is $2,800. That lower rent price is what's called the net effective rent. As for what that term actually means, it's just a fancy way of saying the average monthly rent of the apartment once any free months or any kind of specials are averaged out of it. For example, let's say you have a $2,000 a month apartment and they're offering 1 month free if you sign up for a 12-month lease with them. Well, that $2,000 a month is what's called the gross rent, which is the actual rent that you're going to be charged month over month. We take that $2,000 and we multiply it by 11. This represents the amount of months that you're actually paying for the apartment. With that, we get $22,000. Next, we're going to take that amount and divide it by 12, which represents the total lease term, and we get $1,833. This number is the net effective rent of the apartment. And I know what you're thinking. Instead of going all this, why don't the landlords just charge me the $1,833? Well, the goal of the landlord is to maximize the perceived value of the property that they are owning, especially on paper. So if they can show on paper that they are getting $2,000 a month in rent for an apartment, that raises the value of that specific apartment. It doesn't matter that in reality they're only making $1,833, because on paper, where the value really holds, it's showing a higher amount. It's a whole lot of number manipulation, and if I'm being honest, it's even above my own pay grade. But if you want to skip this headache, you can go over to StreetEasy because it'll actually tell you what the gross rent and the net rent is of the apartment. And if you don't see it on StreetEasy, always be sure to ask the agent or the landlord what the actual gross rent of the apartment is. Okay, we have 2 tips left, so if you made it this far in the video, consider subscribing because it does help the channel out a lot. But we need to talk about what kind of apartment you're gonna be renting now. See, in New York City, there's about 3 different types of apartments you can rent. There's rent-controlled apartments, rent-stabilized apartments, and fair market. Now, rent-controlled apartments are about as rare as finding a unicorn in a pot of gold. These apartments have been around since the 1940s and have been consistently occupied since the 70s, meaning that they have ridiculously low rents, some of them even being under $1,000 a month for a very large 2-bedroom. But don't think you could just go online and find one on StreetEasy or apartments.com. Because these apartments have to be consistently rented in order to keep their rent controlled status, a lot of them get passed down from generation to generation, kind of like family heirlooms. Rent stabilized apartments, on the other hand, are way more common, especially today with all the modern amenity buildings that are being built up. They may not have the low rents that rent controlled has, but they do come with built-in protections for you as the tenant. First, you're protected from any kind of crazy increases. And that's because any rent increases are not made by the landlord, but they are made by the Rent Guidelines Board. This is a board that meets every year and describes what the rent increases will be for that year. For example, currently in 2025, the Rent Guidelines Board increase on a 1-year renewal for a rent-stabilized building is 2.75%. And if you're renewing for 2 years, the increase is only 5.25%. Over the last 3 years, the Rent Guidelines Board increases have been around this same threshold. The next benefit is you're gonna be guaranteed a lease renewal offer every year so long as you're a resident of a rent-stabilized building. That means even if you have a balance on your rent, even if you haven't been paying, even if you've abandoned the apartment completely, you are entitled to a lease renewal offer from the landlord no matter what. Now, fair market apartments are typically the ones that renters are scared of because this is the one where landlords can raise up your rent almost as much as they want. But fair market apartments do provide you with a lot more flexibility in terms of your lease terms than rent stabilized or rent controlled. However, in fair market apartments, you are more than welcome to ask for a lease extension of 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, however long you want, so long as you have the permission of the landlord. Finally, for tip number 7, we need to talk about the neighborhood you're going to be living in so that you can avoid a mistake I made. A classic saying is that a neighborhood at 12 p.m. on a Sunday is very different from a neighborhood at 10 p.m. on a Friday night. This was a mistake I made myself. When I was thinking about getting my apartment in Bushwick, Brooklyn, I was typically only there from 9 to 5 during the work week because I actually worked in the area. I thought it was just a calm place with a bunch of restaurants and a couple of bars here, which sounds good at night. It wasn't until I actually moved in the neighborhood that I got a full glimpse of how it really was. I had the weekend ravers from Brooklyn Mirage and all the people going out to the bars every night. I even had a number of rat issues both in my apartment and outside of the apartment. So I do implore you, if there is a neighborhood that you are interested in living in, to go visit that neighborhood at different times throughout the day. Go there during the day, go there in the early mornings, go there during a weekend night, and be on the lookout for things like noise, foot traffic, and whether or not you actually feel safe there. Because the last thing you want to do is discover that your block turns into a Fast and the Furious meetup every Friday night, kind of like mine did. Apartment hunting in New York City does not have to be a nightmare. With the right tools and preparations, you can easily find yourself a place to call home here. And if this video helped you out, consider watching this one next.